Hello, my name is Tommy, and this video is an informal tutorial to software that I've created called streprogen. This is a strength program generator written in a programming language called Python. It's very powerful and allows you to create strength training programs for beginners, intermediate, and advanced lifters. And unlike tools based on Excel, it's much more versatile. So what it does is it creates programs like this one, where you define the exercises and the days. So you set up something like this. You specify how many days you want to go to the gym, and you write down the exercises that you want to perform on each day. And you just give the program some basic information: the start weight, what your current maximum is, and the end weight or final weight, what you want to end up being able to lift. And you specify the repetition range. For instance, you want to work between 3 and 8 repetitions for bench press. Then you specify the weekly increase in percent, and the program will generate all these sets and repetitions for you automatically. So it uses a lot of math and programming to just generate all this for you given your goals. Of course, it's very important that you input realistic goals. So this is not a program, the software is not meant for a complete beginner. But if you've been training for, say, half a year or at least a few months, you have an idea of where you're at and where you want to be and what kind of progress is realistic. And then this is a great tool to automatically generate programs for you. Unfortunately, it's not as accessible as I'd like, because it's written in a programming language called Python, and most people haven't done any programming before. So the point of this tutorial is just to talk a little bit about how to get started, because I think once you get started and you get a feel for it, you can kind of figure out the rest on your own. But it might be intimidating to have to install a programming language on your computer and just getting started with this in the first place. So before you can do anything, you have to install Python. I recommend using this Anaconda distribution of Python, because whatever your operating system is, you can download Anaconda and it will install Python for you. So whether you're on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, you install this first. Once that's done, you have to open a terminal. In Windows, that's cmd.exe, the terminal. And on Linux, you just, or on Ubuntu at least, you type Ctrl-Alt-T to open a terminal. So here is my terminal. To install streprogen, you have to type something like this. You type python-m pip install, and then I'm going to install 3 packages: matplotlib, Jupyter, and streprogen. I also add -- upgrade to make sure that I get the latest version. Press enter, and I already have these packages, but if you don't have them, you'll have to wait a few seconds or minutes for it to actually download. Once that's done, you type Jupyter, let me just do clear first. You type Jupyter Notebook, and this will open a development environment that's very simple, but it will work for our purposes. I added -- no browser because I just want to copy this URL. So type that, copy this, go here, and you paste it. I already have this demo, but I'm going to delete everything. It will look something like this. And if you're in a terminal, it will the files you see here correspond to wherever you are. So I'm on my desktop and in a folder called streprogen demo right now. And there is just one file here called program.html, which we'll talk about later. So to create a new notebook in Python, you go to New and press Python 3. I'm going to rename this streprogen demo. This is called a cell, and in this you can type code. So you can do something like this, hello world, or you can do like a computation. To execute a cell, I press Control Enter. That executes the cell. If I press Shift Enter, it will execute the cell and take me to the next cell. So Shift Enter or Control Enter to execute a cell. To delete a cell, you just either mark it and go to Cell, or is it Edit, and then Delete Cells. Or I can click out here and then press D twice consecutively. So DD, and it's deleted, DD. Okay, so this is an environment where you can write some code. And if you don't know anything about programming, it doesn't really matter. You just have to see it once and you'll be able to change this to however you want to use it. So I'm going to do from streprogen import program. Like this, it should execute and work fine. And then I write program equals program, like so, and I give my program a name. So I'll call this beginner's program. And a program by itself doesn't really do much. You have to add some days. So to add a day, you do something like this. And then write here program dynamic exercise. And for instance, bench press, that's a famous exercise. Start weight, and you just give it like 100. Nothing happens still. We have to actually do some computations. So I'll write program render, and this is a comment in the code, do the computations, and then print program to print the results. Great, we've just created a program. By default, it's an 8-week program. On average, there will be 25 repetitions per exercise. Right now, it's just one day, Monday, with one exercise, the bench press. The units are kilograms by default. The exercise information contains information about each and every exercise. You see Monday, bench press, start at 100. And by default, the weekly increase is 1.5% per week. And if you take 100 and you compute what's 1.5%, that's 1.5 kilos, times 8. So 1.5 times 8, that's 12. Meaning we'll go from 100 kilos to 112 kilos in 8 weeks if the weekly increase is 1.5% per week. Also by default, the repetition range is between 3 and 8. And there's a periodization scheme that's a default as well. You see we start with 1 8 and 3 7s. And then as the program progresses, the volume goes down. So the total number of repetitions go down. In the first week, we have 29 repetitions. And in the final week, there are only 20 repetitions. As the as the repetitions go down, the intensity increases. So the total number of repetitions go down, and the intensity, that is the average percentage of your maximum that you're doing work at, goes up. So initially you're doing work at 8s and 7s, and in the end you're doing work at the final here is a 3. So you should ask yourself, does this seem realistic? You start out with 8s and 7s, and as you progress you do a 3 on 102 kilos, and then in theory you should be able to do a single repetition on 112 kilos. You should always check these numbers. So here we have some defaults, and this might not be true for you. For instance, the weekly increase at 1.5% might not be true for you. Could be many reasons for this. If you're a beginner, then maybe 1.5% is too low. You can progress faster than that. But if you're a seasoned athlete, then 1.5% per week would be a dream. So you're going to have to lower it down. And to do that, you go to the program and you add this parameter reps per exercise. No, sorry. You add percent increase per week. I can get a help text. So what I'm doing now is, if I put my cursor over program and I press Shift Tab, I get some help. And I can see all these parameters, which are things that I can change related to the program. And one of the things is the percent increase per week. So if you believe 1.5% is way too high, you can put it down to 0.5 instead. And then, of course, in 8 weeks, you will go from 100 to 104 kilos. You can also change this on specific exercises. So I could also do this. So I can remove this, and doing something like 0.5 here will have the exact same effect. So no change. This is useful if you have different exercises. So if I add another exercise like squats, and maybe I start at, I don't know, 120. And for some reason, I might believe that I will have more progress in squats. Then I can change this to 1 for squats. And you see that the weekly increase for bench press and squats are now different. And you also see that squats are actually added to Mondays. To add more days, you just copy this, paste it like so, and let's do Wednesday for instance, and we'll add some deadlifts. Maybe the start width is 140, and we just want to use the default of 1.5 here. So now notice 2 things. So one is the structure of the program. The week now has 2 days, where the first day has bench presses and squats, and the second day, Wednesday, has deadlifts. Also notice the different weekly increases. 0.5 as we specified here, 1 for squats as we specified here, and that's down here, and deadlifts will default to 1.5. If I provide this information on the program instead of the exercises, it will override globally. So what will happen if I do something like this? If the increase is not specified on the exercise level, it will use the global program default. So bench press and deadlifts will be assigned 2%, and squats, because I've explicitly done an override, will have a 1% increase per week. You can verify this down here. And this is true for many parameters in this software. You can either give it on a program level or on an exercise level. And if nothing is specified on the exercise level, it will default to whatever you give on the program level. if nothing at all is given on the program level, it will default to the defaults that I set when I created this stuff, which is 1.5%. Okay. Let me show you some other parameters. I will, just for the sake of showing you this, remove these days and only leave up the bench press. One thing that I can change is the duration. The default is 8 weeks, but I can simply do this to get a 12-week program. So now if I scroll down, it's 12 weeks. So it's very dynamic. You don't have to, like, adding an exercise or adding more weeks or whatever. You just give it a template of what you want to achieve, and the software will compute all this stuff for you, all the details. You can change the units. By default it's kilograms, but maybe you are in the US and you don't like kilograms, then you can do pounds. Or maybe you don't like having units. So, like, why would you have units here in the first place? You know whether you're in Europe or in the US, so you don't need to know that it's pounds every single time. And then you can just pass in this empty string like so, and I do shift enter to the computation. This is what I usually do personally. Just remove it, and because I know for me it's kilograms because I'm in Europe. I don't need to be reminded every time. We can also change the repetitions per exercise, and to do so we just pass in this parameter. So if you feel like 25 repetitions is a bit too much or a bit too low, you can change it maybe to 15. And then you see this different program. And you actually get a warning here because the software will warn you if you do something that seems a bit ridiculous. And less than 15 repetitions is a bit low. There might be good reasons for doing that, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't stop you from doing it. It's just a warning saying that 1 week has repetitions less than 15. You're free to do it. The software will try its best to accommodate your wishes, but it might be a good idea to look at these warnings. It's just a signal that what you're doing is a bit non-standard. For instance, if I change the weekly increase, so I go here and I change this to, like, I don't know, 10% per week. That's way too high. It's completely unrealistic. And then the program will tell you bench press grows with 10% each week, because it's not standard. It's probably wrong. It might be correct, and it will do the computations, but it will just give you a friendly warning. So you can ignore this if you want to. Now I want to show you different ways of defining your progress. And again, it's easier to show this with just one exercise. Let me change this to, I don't know, 20. So when you supply information to the bench press exercise, there are 3 ways to tell the software how you want to progress. You can give it a start weight, and it will automatically give you a weekly increase of 1.5% if you don't do anything else. You can also, and I do shift tab to get this help text. You can give it a final weight. So you can say, oh, I want to go from 100 kilos to 130. That corresponds to a weekly increase of 2.5%. Might be unrealistic for 12 weeks, but it depends a lot on who you are. So there will probably not be a warning. No warning. still within the bounds of what I consider to be perhaps appropriate. So you can either do this, you give it the start and final weight, or you can, let me just write squats, you can give it the start weight and give this one a specific increase. That's also allowed. So then it will automatically infer what the final weight will be if you increase by 1% per week. And that's of course starting at 100, 12 weeks, that takes you to 112. And the final option that you have is to specify the final weight as well as the increase per week. So say deadlifts here, I'll just use a different number to show you. So you want to end up at 200 kilos. You want to increase by 1% per week. And that corresponds to starting at 178.6 kilos, the weekly increase of 1% over 12 weeks. That will take you to 200. So what you can do is you can either specify the start and the final weight, or you can say where you are and what increase you expect, or you can give it your goal and your percentage per week. It's really hard for me to make any recommendations about parameters because I don't know who you are. If you're an 18-year-old man who's really interested in strength training and you eat well and you sleep well and you have some beginner gains, then your weekly increase can be quite high for some exercises. If you're a 40-year-old and you have been training for a long time, then the weekly increase, you're not going to be able to have much progress anymore because you're getting older and maybe you've been training for 10 years. So then an increase of 0 point something is more realistic. So it's really hard for me to say. You should talk to someone who has some experience, and you should use your own experience to guide these numbers. The danger of this is the same as its strength. It's so versatile and you can do so much, so it's quite easy to screw it up by setting the wrong parameters. I highly recommend that the increase is a bit lower than you think and that your start weight is lower than you think. So let's say your bench press is actually 100. You've gone to the gym and you're able to do 100 for one repetition. That's your 1RM for bench press. I would suggest starting it lower. So I'd probably start at 95 because you don't want to go into a new program and go heavy on week 1. And then I would recommend choosing a low increase. Again, it depends a lot on who you are, but if you try like, I don't know, 3%, then you see, right? Well, it seems a bit unrealistic that you'll be able to do. If this seems unrealistic in 3 months' time, then go back, change the parameter, maybe 2, and then go down and look again. So this is an interactive exercise where you have to try some parameters, scroll down, look at the first week and see, well, given my current strength, is this realistic? It shouldn't be heavy on your first week. And then go to the final week and see, well, is this realistic given the time frame? And then change if you believe it's unrealistic. And I would recommend that even in this final week, I would err on the side of a bit too light rather than too heavy. So my experience is you don't, and some people will disagree, and this software facilitates whatever your philosophy is, but my experience is that it's better to train a bit on the light side as long as you have progress. So if you follow a plan over time and that plan ensures that you're getting stronger every week, then whether that increase is high or not so high, it doesn't really matter, because you're getting stronger every single week. And even if you can just increase by 1% or less every week, and you stay with it and you're consistent for years, you're going to see amazing progress. So that's what I have to say about these parameters. Let's talk a bit about some other parameters. You can change, if you have an exercise like curls, all of this is overkill. Like you just want to do some curls at the end of your workout. What you can do then is you can add a static exercise, and you give it a name like curls, and then just a static like 4 times 10. So 4 sets, 10 repetitions. I do shift enter, and this will add curls after bench press for every week, but it's completely static. It doesn't do any computations for you. It's just 4 sets of curls every single week. So it doesn't make sense to use start weights and increases for those small exercises always. It could be okay, but personally, if I do curls or I do some triceps work or whatever, do some stomach work, I just do something like this. You can also add, like if you wanted to do some stretching and you just wanted a new program to remind yourself, and you want to do some stretches for your, I don't know, shoulders, your groin, and your calves, you could do something like this maybe. And then you'll get a reminder that you're supposed to do some stretching at the end of Mondays. Let's talk a little bit about periodization. Periodization is this idea that you change the volume and intensity. If you're a beginner, you don't need periodization. You just need to increase your weights a little bit every week. Just simple linear progress. That's fine. By default, there's a periodization in programs. As you saw, we start out doing 7s. If I change this to 25, you'll see it. And I'm just going to bring this back to the default. So yeah, you start out with 8 and 7 and go down to doing 5 to 3 on the final week. That's the default. So by default, the periodization is like this. The volume starts out high and it goes down, and the intensity starts out low and it goes up. And this is fine, but you can change it if you want to. You can really do whatever you like with this stuff. So if you would like to have higher or lower intensity, that's not a problem. I'll show it with just one exercise. So you've seen that you can change repetitions per exercise, but you can also change the intensity. So I can change this to, I don't know, 80. This means that on average in this program, you should be at 80% of your max. You'll be a bit lower in the start and a bit higher at the end, but you can see now you have 2 8s, whereas earlier you had 1. And here you don't have a 3, you have a 4. Likewise, I can increase it to, like, I don't know, let's try 85. That probably corresponds to what we saw. No, it's slightly different. You have a lot of 3s here at the end. And now it seems like there are a bit, maybe too many repetitions towards the end of this program. So you might want to bring this down a little bit to 22. Looks a bit more sensible. If you want to turn off this implicit periodization, where we start high with volume and start low with intensity, of course you can do that as well. You can do whatever you want with this. So to do that, I do rep scalar func, and here I have to input a number for each week that the repetitions will be scaled with. So to show you this, I'll bring it down to a 6-week program, and I'll just do a constant list of ones. And this will keep the reps constant throughout the program. Because the way the software works is it goes to week 1, and then it asks, well, how many repetitions do we have to do this week? It will take 1 and multiply it by 22, and that's the number of repetitions in the first week. And then next week it'll take 1 times 22 and so forth for each and every of those 6 weeks. So now the number of repetitions is constant. But notice that because the intensity is still increasing, you have to add more sets to actually get an equal amount of repetitions in the first and final week. The number of repetitions specifically, if you were to start counting and adding these numbers, it wouldn't always be 22 exactly. It's set to 22, and you can see here it's 22, but here it's actually 23. It will very rarely be off by more than 1 or 2. It uses an algorithm based on mathematical optimization, which will bring you as close as possible. So you're guaranteed to be as close as possible. But sometimes it's impossible to satisfy all the parameters, so then it'll do its best basically. To keep the intensity constant as well, I add intensity scalar func, scalar as in scaling, as in multiplying, like so. And now the sets and repetitions will be completely locked down. It's the same every single week. The only thing that changes is the weight, because of the progress that you're supposed to have with your weights. So now you're in a position where you can start doing your own periodization. So go back to this chart, and you can define these numbers so that intensity goes up and volume goes down. And if you want to do that manually, you could do like 0.9 maybe, and then second week 0.95. So in the first week you'll have, let's bring this down to 20 just to demonstrate. The first week we'll have 20 times 0.9, that's 18. 18 repetitions is the goal for the first week. The second week we'll have 19, and then 20, and then 21. Let's see, let's do one more one here, and then like so. So this final week we'll have 22. Let's see what that looks like. Did I? Yeah. Okay. Let's do the opposite for intensity. We start, sorry, this starts at low repetitions and goes to high. So then let's do like an inverse periodization where we start, so it's the opposite, right? The repetitions start low and go high, but typically you start with high volume and you go low. But let's just keep doing this and see what happens. So I start with high intensity and I go down a little bit, something like this. Yeah, so it's kind of the opposite. You start with low volume, high intensity, and then as it progresses, you get high volume and low intensity. You can play around with this, and this will apply to every single exercise. So if you add a new day, I don't know, you do Wednesday and squats, I don't know, 120, it will be equal for every week. But you can change squats, like if you want to do more repetitions for squats, you can bring this up to 25 instead of 20. So if it's not specified on the exercise level, it will use 20. If it's specified here, it will use 25. Control Enter to run. And you see that there are more repetitions for squats, but the intensity is the same. So you're doing 4s and 3s, and that's what you're doing here as well. Let me show you what happens if I do something that's slightly stupid, like I do this. I add a scalar of 1.1, so that will take the intensity on the first week up to 93.5. So what will happen now? We'll get an error message. Okay. Why? Well, it says the exercise bench press is restricted to repetitions in the range 3 to 5. That's the default. So we're always between 3 and 8. 3 and 8. This maps to intensities in the range 75.5 and 90.7. So 3 repetitions corresponds to 90.7% of your max, and 8 repetitions corresponds to 75%. But we just said that we wanted to scale up to 93 in intensity. But that's impossible because we've said that we're only willing to go down to 3s. So you can't have an intensity of higher than 90.7 if you're not allowed to do 1s or 2s instead of 3s. So you've given the software conflicting goals here. And this is just a warning. It will do to the best of its ability what you're trying to accomplish. But we might want to look into this warning and take it seriously. So to fix this, we could either change the intensity and say, well, that's too high. Just bring this down. Or we can change the repetitions. So we can do min reps equals 1. Let's do that for both exercises. See what happens. So now it's going down to 1s on the first week. So the average intensity will be as close as possible to 93.5. And there are no warnings anymore. So now it seems to work. This, of course, these are way too many sets. So if I was doing serious programming here, I would say, okay, these are too high. So I would take the repetition scalars and bring them down. And I would try something like this. That's still, well, this one's too high. This one's too high as well. This one in particular. So it's an interactive process where you try different things. These repetitions, too high. Let's remove this. Just to show you earlier. I still feel like this is too much. So let's try 0.5. That looks okay. It's not too bad. Might want to have some more sets here. So then I can bring this to 0.75 and see. Okay, this looks like an okay program, except of course the periodization is opposite of what we expect. So the overarching idea here is that you can define these periodization schemes however you like them, and you can create templates for programs that are very long term and that have different different periodizations, however you want to construct it. So again, talking about parameters is a bit difficult because I don't know who you are. I'm just talking to my computer screen. So I don't want to make any recommendations, except for if you don't know what you're doing, then maybe just leave it as defaults. But if you know what you're doing, this is insanely powerful. You can do things like this, and you can, like if I want to do a repeating scheme here, I could do something like this. I want the rep scalars to be something like 1.1, 1.0, 1.9, and I just multiply this by 10. That will repeat this pattern 10 times. Now I have 30 weeks of information. And then I do something like the opposite for intensity. So when repetitions are high, I want intensity to be a bit lower. So maybe it would look something like this. And then since I have 3 times 10 entries, I can set the duration to 30 weeks. And then I can pass this parameter in here and this parameter in here. So the parameter of the program is equal to this variable which has the same name. So this is a repeating pattern of periodization in 3-week cycles. Let's run this and just see what it looks like. So here you have a pattern which repeats every 3 weeks. I'm not saying this is something that you necessarily want to do. The 3 weeks was just an example, but it's just to show you the power of the software. Okay, I've shown you a lot of stuff. I want to show you 1 or 2 more things. And to do that, I'm going to remove some of this code. I'll bring everything back to as close to defaults as possible. Just remove this. We'll just use 1 exercise to demonstrate the principles. This is good, and then do an 8-week program like so. Okay. If you're an experienced lifter, you don't want to go as heavy every single week. When you're new and you have beginner gains, you can increase the weight every single week, and you should do so incrementally and slowly for as long as you can. But if you've been training for a few years, you might want to do something like every other week is a light week. Or if you've been training for years and years, maybe you don't go heavy except once every month. So let's look at how we can make every other week a light week. And this will require a bit more programming, but the key is this progression function. Progression func here. So I'm going to do import, let's see, program. I'm going to import progression sawtooth. And I'm going to define a progression function, and then I will pass it in here. Let me show you progression sawtooth, what it is. So I'll just take a new cell, do this, and then I'm going to import a library for plotting because I want to show you this graphically. So I'm going to do from matplotlib pyplot import plt. Sorry, import matplotlib pyplot as plt, like so. All right, this function takes in these parameters. There's quite a lot here. And what I want to do is I'm going to do from functools import partial. I'm not going to explain what all of these lines do, because I just want to show you the principle. It's not a programming tutorial. You can find this code, you can copy it, you can play with it, and you can pause this video and do what I'm doing. So I'm not going to go deeply into the programming. And I'm going to say function equals functools partial, and pass this as the first argument. Weeks equals 12. Start week, let's do 12. Start week equals 1. Final week equals 12. Start weight equals 100. So imagine we want to go from 100 to final weight equals 100 and I don't know, 130 maybe. And then I'm going to say, I'm just going to copy these parameters in here. Format, sorry. Like this. Okay. I'm going to make a plot. First, I'm going to say weeks is a list going from 1 to 12. So there's a syntax error. Final week equals, yeah. See this? I'm missing a comma here. So I add a comma and then run it. Functools. Okay. Oh yeah. Import partial. So then I should just do this. Okay. Here we have the weeks going from 1 to 12, and weight is going to be, I'm going to call this function on every week for week in weeks, and I'm going to plot it. So plt plot, I'm going to plot week weights. Keyword argument weeks. Let's see. Week start weight. Start week, final week. Yeah. Like so. Weeks. Weights. Okay. So this is programming for you. There are always errors and you have to figure out where you typed the wrong thing. Basically, here's what I want to show you. If you want to go from 100 in the first week to 130 in the 12th week, this is the simplest way to progress your weights. You just add something every single week. This is linear progression. It's the simplest thing you can do. If you have a long-term plan, you could expect some more progress initially. So there's a non-linearity parameter called k here. So it's non-linearity. And if I increase that to 1, you will see that the progress changes slightly. It has a slight bend to it. And this is more true if I increase it. So if I do 10, it has an extreme bend initially. But the idea is that if you're a beginner and you want to do some long-term planning, you can expect that most of your progress will happen early on. So maybe if you're doing planning for, this is 3 months, maybe 2 is actually more realistic. You get most of your progress initially because you're not so adapted, and it tapers off. This is the law of diminishing returns. You get diminishing returns for your exercise. So if you're untrained, you progress quickly. But the more trained you are, the slower progress comes. So if you model this in a 12-week setting, then maybe 1 is correct here. So you want to do a bit more initially, and then it'll taper off slightly towards the end. Where it gets more interesting is the period, because this is a sawtooth progress. And if I add a period of 2, this means that every other week will be a rest week. Now I have to correct the boundaries here because it only tries to, on average, hit my values. So you see it starts off at lower than 100. And that's because in a periodic cycle, it will try to hit the average. But I actually want the first week to be 100 and the final week to be exactly 130. So I have to change this to true. And this corresponds to a light week, heavier, and then a lighter week, and heavier and lighter and heavier, and so forth. And you can change this period parameter to whatever you like. So if you want to do something like 3, that's possible. This is basically 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We can do, yeah, you get the point. You can do whatever you want here. So if you want to do like really long-term planning, you want to plan for, I don't know, 6 months ahead in time. I don't recommend doing this, but then you could do something like this and then scale it up a little bit to, actually I'm going to scale it down a little bit. Yeah, maybe this is a decent plan for progress over half a year. You work up and then you take a resting week and then work up again. And this is also a form of periodization. But it's not periodization with respect to intensity or volume. It's periodization with respect to the weights that you're actually lifting in this case. Let's bring this back to 12. Like so. And I am going to bring this up pretty high just to show you period equals 2, just to show you what happens here. And I can actually use this should be 13 down here. And I can use this in my program to change the linear progression, so every other week will be light. And to do so, I copy this code and I do something like this. This partial function is going to bind these parameters to the progression sawtooth function. If you don't know what I mean by that, then don't worry. But the program knows the start and final weights and the start and final week, so I don't need these. What I want to bind, what I want to specify is the period and the scale and the nonlinearity. I'm going to remove this and run it. And now we should see that our progress will be something like this. So let's look at the weights. So pretty light in the first week, and then pretty heavy. Actually, the scale here is a bit too high. It's not realistic, probably. But it starts low, then it goes high, and then it's low, high, low, high, and so forth. And it's the heaviest on the final week. This says 8 weeks, so I might want to change it a little bit, because now let's see what it looks like if I do this. Yeah, the error is gone. Yeah, so by changing this default progression function and defining your own function, you can change how you progress in weights. So it doesn't have to be like this. You can actually add something like a sawtooth if you want to. And you can do this for other parameters as well. So instead of only doing it for weights, you can do it for intensity and volume as well. So you can use the same trick to change these guys. So that gives you the option to do some pretty advanced periodization. I realized that this was not a very good explanation, especially if you haven't done any programming before. And it might take you some time to figure all this out, but it's very powerful. And you can do really long-term planning. Thankfully, there's documentation here on this GitHub page for the software. So you can look at advanced features. For instance, these are examples on how to make training programs. They're more comprehensive than what I've been talking about now. And you also have some sample programs in this library. So you can look here and you can actually run. This is also a notebook, but it's run online. So I can do I can run everything. Just do Shift Enter. I must sign in. That's annoying. I'm not signed in right now. Sorry. But anyway, you can inspect this code for a really advanced example on how to do progression over the long term, and how to change these scale factors and make these plots and then input everything into a program. If you read this, you should start by reading about essential features and then read them in this order, or you can just look at these. The last thing that I want to mention is the output, because this text, this plain text, is not very aesthetically pleasing. So you have two options. You can do print program to HTML, like so, and this will give you the contents of an HTML file. So then I can copy this stuff, and then I can go to desktop and then go to the demo. And if you have an HTML file, if you don't, just create one, but then you can, let's see, edit this in some kind of text editor, paste in the code that I copied from here, save it, and then open it in a browser, and you'll see the program. Alternatively, even better, you can do to tech like this. And this is the code for a PDF file. If you don't know tech and you don't have LaTeX installed, you can use a website such as this one. It's not working for me right now, but it's latexbase.com. And here you can paste this code and it will give you a PDF like this PDF, which you can print or you can put on your phone or do whatever you want. So I hope this was a useful tutorial on how to get started. This periodization of strength levels, and also the periodization of volume and intensity, it's a bit advanced. So if you're just a beginner, then try to find a decent program, compound exercises, maybe 3 times a week, find one online, then create the program, specify your days, specify your exercises, and just use the defaults. That's my recommendation. If you're more advanced and you want to play around with changing the progress function, changing intensity, volume, and so forth, you can do that as well. As I said earlier, it's a very powerful piece of software. It's more powerful than what you could do with Excel, and I haven't seen anything quite like it. So I think if you invest some time and you try to learn about it, you'll be very happy, and you'll be able to create some very advanced strength training programs. If you're not sure where to start, there's this great book by Mark Ripto called Practical Programming for Strength Training, which I recommend reading. Talks about how to create strength training programs, and it's very good. It's applicable to beginners and intermediate and advanced athletes. So thanks a lot. I'll put links up in the description for all of the stuff that you've seen, and good luck. If you have any questions, you can go here and create an issue. To create an issue, you need an account on GitHub, but you can create an issue here if you have some